Okay, so one thing, let me close some of this stuff. Go back to my code. Okay, so I have a inside of lectures, inside of day 6, I have a pre-made, I called it RAM demo, Rick and Morty demo. And then I have a checklist in here, and I want to talk about this a little bit as we're going through the demo. Let me open this in a new window. Okay, did Winter talk about Markdown with you guys at all? I would guess she did, but if she didn't, then you guys know what Markdown is? No, okay. I'll assume that nobody knows that. So Markdown is pretty cool. I love Markdown. I never open word processors anymore. If I need to write anything, I write it in Markdown. So what Markdown is basically, it's kind of like HTML, but simplified. So if I wanted to make a heading in Markdown, I just put a hash and then it'll bold the output. If I want a subheading, I could put more dashes and this will be the subheading. Okay. If I wanted bullet points, I could just do dash and this is a bullet point. If I want code, I can put code in here. So just put that in the blocks and it will render code, formatted to look like code. The reason I'm bringing this up is I highly encourage you to start making a checklist of everything you do when you create applications. Okay, because the complexity it gets more and more complex as we go along. We're just going to keep adding to the things you need to keep track of, the things you're going to need to remember when you're making your React app. So I find checklists invaluable. I forget my name if I don't write it down. So I have to, checklists to me are crucial. So if you want to make a checklist, if I put a dash, open bracket, space, and then I could it'll make this little box where you can put check marks. So first thing we're going to do when we're creating a React application is, create a React app, and then we run this code to create the React app, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to say npm create beat at latest. I think I'm going to need to reinstall Windows. Something is taking, it shouldn't be this slow. Okay, there we go. So again, the dot, I just want to put everything in this same directory. So I'm just going to use dot for the current directory. Since I already have a document in here, it gives me the option. I'm just going to ignore files and continue. That'll preserve my checklist. And then we just go as normal, select React, select JavaScript with Speedy Web Compiler. Okay. So I've done that step. What do I need to do next? And I know it tells you, but I'm just saying you can make your checklist as detailed or minimal as you want.
npm install.
Yeah. We want to install our dependencies. So we could say install dependencies. So that's going to be npm I is fine for install. So let me run that. Taking a really long time. Okay, cool. So now my dependencies are installed, and then I just start my server with npm run dev. So the other cool thing you can do with Markdown is if I want to say, I'm going to say modify, and I want to modify app.jsx. So if I put, can you guys see this okay? Yeah. If I put square brackets and parentheses, this is how you make a link in Markdown. So notice that in my previewer, it's has the link here. So if I want to link to files within my file structure, I can start with dot and it'll show me the options I have available. So if I wanted to link this to a file, it shows me all the files I can link to. If I want to link to a directory, I do / and it will show me the directories that I can link to. So I want to go to app.jsx. So I know that that's in SRC, and here's app.jsx. Okay, so now when I click this, it'll take me right to app.jsx or app.jsx. Okay. Yeah, it takes a little practice, but I'd say the learning curve is pretty shallow for Markdown. It's pretty easy. So yeah, if I want to refactor this, and let's take out all this stuff. So if I want to remember like what this is the code that needs to go in here, I could just copy this. And then if you want it to render with look like different programming languages, you can say JavaScript. Paste the code. Close your code fences, I think they call them. It's not showing up. Let me close this. There it is. Okay, so you can, put as much or as little in here as you want. If this helps, I hope this helps. This is buggy. If you try to copy and paste it from here, last time I tried it, it didn't work very well. So, but you can always, copy from here if you want. Okay, anyway, back to the task at hand. I would like to make an application that's basically going to render characters from the Rick and Morty cartoon. So I'm going to go to the Rick and Morty API. Always start with the documentation. Okay. There's all kinds of stuff. Some people have made libraries for this API, which people have a lot of time on their hands, apparently. So you could use a built-in library, but we're going to do this on our own. We're not going to use any sort of third-party stuff. So all I want from this is my endpoint. So I'm just going to do characters to make our lives easy. So this is the endpoint I'm going to hit with my API calls. I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to refrain from putting everything in app.js, right? So I'm going to want components that are going to live inside of app, but then do the work I want them to do. Okay, so I'm going to have inside of SRC, I'm going to make a components directory. And the other cool thing you can do with checklists is I can say create home JSX. So if I put this in and I link to it, src /src / components, and I type out the name of the file I want there. Now, when I click and notice that it doesn't exist. If I click on it, it'll ask, Visual Studio Code will ask if I want to create it. Okay, and it'll create the component in the directory where I want it. Okay, so I'm going to render, I'm going to use my snippet tool, or AF. There it is, CE. Okay, so I've got my home component. And let me close the checklist for now. We'll open up app.jsx. Okay. Server's running. Let me check and see what I have so far. Should be empty. Open up my inspect tools. Open up my console. I don't see any errors, so it looks like we're in good shape. So how do I get my home component to render? So right now I just have the text home in here. How do I get it to show up on the page?
Import home.
Exactly. I almost forgot that. Import home and then render it, right? Okay, there's my home. I'm going to use Bootstrap just to make it a little more interesting. So I'm going to get my Bootstrap and Bootstrap CDN. And make sure I get the right one this time. I think this is the one. Yeah, this is 5. Yeah. So I'm just going to take the Bootstrap and put it just like you normally would, or the way you did in Python if you use Bootstrap. Just put it right in here inside of index.html. Let me get the JavaScript too. Okay, and then cool. So what I want to do now is make the API call and get data from the from my API. So I'm just going to keep rendering home for now, but I want to hit this endpoint and start trying to get data from this API. Okay, so if I'm going to make an API call inside of a component, components are pure functions. What do I need to make asynchronous calls? What hook do I need?
Use effect.
Use effect. So I'm going to come up here, use effect. I'm going to import the use effect hook from React. And then in here, I'm just going to call the function. So I'm just going to say use effect. Use effect takes a callback function. And then any asynchronous code is going to go in here. So I'm going to start with just using fetch. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Get this. There we go. So we'll clean this up a little bit. Cool. What is fetch going to return?
Response.
A response in the form of a
HTML document.
I talked about it this morning.
Oh, that's right. Oh my God.
A promise.
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 Promise. Right. Fetch returns a promise. So if I want to access that promise, whether it's the data I want or the error I get, I'm going to chain on .thence. Right. That'll give me access to whatever fetch is going to return. Okay. So I'm just going to console log it for now, just so we can take baby steps. So we'll just say res arrow function console.log res. Okay, so whatever happens when I call this function, I should see it now in my terminal when I refresh my page. And let me back up. I forgot to mention this. What useEffect does is it will render the component completely, right? So it will render my home component. Once the component's rendered, it will then make the asynchronous call. So the component will render, then it will make the call to my API. Okay. So let's see what we get. I'm going to go back here and I got my response. Okay. Got a 200. We got all this stuff in here. We got a body, which is a readable stream, which that's kind of what I want to get, right? So the body is readable. A stream is basically like think of it as a stream of text, like a river of data that's flowing. We want to capture that stream into something we can use. Okay. So I'm going to call a method on the res.json. Oh, got to invoke it. Okay, let's see what we get. We get a promise. Okay, so the .json method returns a promise. If we have a promise and we want to handle the data, what do? We got a promise here, right? The way we handled the promise was we tacked on a .then. Same thing here. So right now, actually, this is returning undefined. So let me delete that. So now this then call is going to return res.json, which returns a promise. So I can tack on another .then to handle that promise. Okay, then I'm going to say data, arrow function, and let's console log our data. Console log data. Okay, so we're getting our promise back. We're converting it into a format that we want to use, right? So when we first called our promise, first called fetch.api, the fetch API, we get the readable stream. We want to convert that here to something we can use. And then now we're just going to take a look at it. We're just going to see what we get. Okay, so let's refresh. And looks like we're getting results back. Okay. So if I go to my characters endpoint, I'm going to get characters. If the API gets updated, there could be more characters. If I have data that's changing like this, where do I want to store it? Where do we put data that may change? We fill out a form. State. So in addition to useEffect, I'm going to import useState. And I'm going to set up the state to handle my data. So I'm going to say const. They're characters, so I'm going to call it characters. So that's my getter. Now I want my setter. So I'm going to say set characters. Let's see, characters set. I spell it right? I think so. Equals useState. And what am I getting? What is results? It's usually going to be
It's an array of objects.
Yeah, array of objects. So I'm going to set my default to an array. Okay, and let's just make sure that it goes into my state. I'm going to console.log characters. Okay, so how do I get the data that comes back, this stuff, into my character's state? Sorry, I'm missing the chat. If anybody said anything. Okay. So first of all, if I refresh, look at what I'm getting back. What am I getting back? What data type is this?
That's an object.
An object, right?
Yeah.
The stuff I want is inside that object, right? So I've got two object, well, I've got an object info, and then I've got the array of data that I want, right? So I want to get to that. So if this is what I'm logging, which is what I call data, how would I pull the results off of data? Side by side. Sorry, I'm trying to get things side by side here so you guys can see both.
Would it be a for loop?
No, we don't need a for loop.
No.
If I've got, right, this is what I got. It's an object. This object has two properties. I want this one. How do I pull it off of the array? I'm sorry, pull it off of the object.
Be data.results, right?
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Data.results. I want to drill down into what comes back from my API and get what I want. And this is exactly what I want. I want a list of all the characters. Okay. So how do I get this into my state? How do I set this data into my character's state? Right now, characters is empty, right? I'm console logging my characters on line 5. I got an empty array. I want this empty array to hold all this data. So how do I modify my state?
Would you push your data onto uState?
You're on the right track. Yeah, exactly. I've got an empty array here, but we can't modify. You're saying push. We don't want to modify it directly, right? We want to use our setter, right? So we want to use the state functionality. We want to, anytime we want to modify state, we want to use either the getter or the, well, anytime we want to modify, we want to use the setter. So I'm just going to replace console.log with set characters. Okay, that'll take my characters that I get from my API and put them in this empty array. Okay, does that make sense? Let me take a poll. There's... See where everybody's at. Okay, I got 2 people a little lost. So that's not good. Well, it's not good that anybody's lost. I don't want one person, but any questions? And if you're
I'm one of those slightly lost people. So
okay, yeah.
How is it setting the data? Like I get that you put it in there, you get the result, but like before, whenever we've done anything like this, we've had to like invoke a function or some sort of method.
You talking about like
Is
the callback function in here?
yes.
Yeah.
Like are we basically telling it to do something and then the characters are the return and we're just and that by default sets the set characters?
So yeah, with it, if I were doing something like updating a form data, I might do something like this. I might say, here's my previous data, right? I'm being lazy. Let me type this out. So if I want to modify an existing state, I would do something like prev arrow function. And then if I have a previous state, I'm going to want to say, spread out my previous state, comma, and then anything new or modified would be in here, which would be, in this case, data dot. I forget what it is, results. But we don't really need to worry about this in this case because there's the only data we're dealing with in this situation is coming directly from our API. So we don't need to worry about previous state or modifying state. Oh, wait, here's Christian. We only provide a callback to set state. If the new, very good. Yeah. So if the new value depends on the previous state. The fact that I'm adding or resetting the state from an empty array to an array with the characters I get from my API, it doesn't matter that it was an empty array before. Does that make sense, Tyler? Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Okay, so let me just put this back to what I had. There we go. Okay. So let me save this. And anybody notice anything about my console? You see what's happening?
I feel bad for the people who own the Rick and Morty API.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, guys. What's happening?
You're clogging up all their ports for requests.
I'm looping continuously, right? So
Yeah.
will that stop it? No, that doesn't even stop it.
And it's not going to stop it. Yeah, you're going to have to comment out your code, or you're going to have to stop your server,
Oh,
or
yeah.
close the tab.
Let's do that. Let's close the tab. I feel bad. Why is this happening? Why am I getting a loop? So I said the component renders, then use effect runs after the component renders, right? After the component renders, I set state. What happens when you set state? You muted yourself, Dennis.
Classic. It renders again.
Renders again, right? So it renders it again. Then after the component renders, I call use effect again. It sets the state. Re-renders again. So it's going to keep doing that over and over and over and over and over again. Okay. So the way I prevent this is I want to give use effect a dependency list. Okay. This means if anything I put in here will trigger use effect to be called. If I leave it empty, then use effect will only run one time. Okay, so now when I do this, let me just restart. And open up my inspect tools, my console. So it logs a couple of times, but that's just because of the use strict component in the main.jsx. So it's only running one time. It's getting my data and it's stopping. Okay, questions so far? Make sense? Yeah, 2 times is better than once a second, right? Or however many times a second it runs. Okay, everybody's with me? Questions? Okay, so I'm getting my data. Now I want to render it. So I don't want my home component to do multiple things, right? I want my home component to basically be where I get my API call, where I make my API call, and then I want another component to be responsible for the rendering, right? So I want the characters to render, but I want to kind of make it a little bit on the fancy side, right? I want to put like the character data inside of a, like, let's say a card, Bootstrap card. So let's go to Bootstrap. See if I can get a card. There's docs. Oh, there it is. So let's do this one. Okay, so I want to render a card for every element in that I get back from the API call. So I'm going to make another component called character card. Okay. CHA. I'm just gonna leave it char. You guys okay with that? Understand that char means character. Okay. So I'm going to make my boilerplate, and I'm going to take the card that I got from Bootstrap, and I'm just going to paste it in here. And I'm going to format it a little bit. Okay, so what do I need? What do I need to change in here? Not state yet. What do I do? I'm talking about just like in terms of the rendering. I can't use the class, right? I can't use class is a keyword in React, so I need to do what instead?
Class name.
Class name. So I'm change this to class name. Image, I think that has to be self-closing. Yeah. Cool. So I've got my character card. And right now, all I want to happen is when I want to loop through my characters, and let's just render this placeholder card for now. Okay, so I should see, I think I'm getting 20 characters back initially. I should see 20 of these cards render on my page. So instead of returning home, I want to loop through all my characters and have a card display for each of them. So what do I need to do? I'm gonna
Import char card at the top and then render it somewhere around line 16.
import char card. Okay, and then just say char card, right?
Mm-hmm.
Forgot something else. So the style in React is a little different, right? I can't set up my style like this, right? What does style have to be in React?
Do we have to wrap those in the double curlies?
Yeah, exactly. Double curlies. It takes I want to render the JSX, and basically this is how I remember it. I have my JSX or JavaScript I want to render, and then this is just an object that represents my style. So width is just the way it normally is, and then we put quotes around the property and no semicolons. Okay, it looks like it's working now. So I get my card. But I want one for each character. Right, I want one of these to render for every character. So how do I loop over my state elements and do something for each one of them? We had an array method we were using during the first week when we had an array and we wanted to do something for every element in the array.
Would it be something like for I in use state char
Yes.
card?
Yes, but we don't want to use a for loop. What method do we use last week? Think back to the object master assignment. If you wanted to do something to each one of the Pokemon objects, what did you use?
We had to spread it.
We
Well, no. Yeah.
So characters is my state. It's this, right? This array. I want to do something for every element, so I'm going to map over it. Right? That's good. That's saying for every object in this array, I want you to perform what I say in this arrow function, right? So I'm going to give map an arrow function. I'm going to have that function execute for every element in my character array. So I'm going to say characters.map character, and I'll just say char. And for every character, what did I say I wanted? I want one of these, right? So for every character in my state, I want one of these cards. Okay, so I'm saying character.map for each char, meaning each one of these individual objects, I want you to render a character card. Okay, so when I save this, I get 20 character cards. Okay. Question so far? Does that make sense? Let me just take a quick poll. Okay. Oh, I was getting excited. Nobody was lost. Okay. It's okay if you're lost though. Please don't feel bad. Okay. Share results. Okay. Cool. So any questions? And let me just say, I'm happy to repeat myself. That's what they pay me to do. So if you want me to go over this again now or individually later, I'm happy to do it. Please don't be afraid to ask. Okay, so what I want is to display the data in this card, right? I don't just want to repeat the same card. So how do I get the data into the card? So what is char? Okay, never mind. Well, let me console log it. But what is it? First time through, it's Rick, then it's Morty, then it's Summer, then it's Beth. So how do I get this object into this component? How do I pass data from a parent to a child?
It would the implementation, I don't know, but you would need to do something like char.name, char.status, all that
Right.
kind of stuff, right?
Exactly. But I need to get it to the point where open to the side. Oh my gosh, I'll close this for now. So you're absolutely right. I want to be able to say char dot whatever, right? So I need to get this char into this component, right? I want to pass it from parent to child. The way I remembered it, anytime you're passing, you need props, right? These go together. So pass props. So I'm going to say char equals char. Okay. So I'm basically taking the data that comes every time I loop, right? For each one of these, I'm making a character card component and I'm passing the data into it. Okay. So let's see what that does. Let me go into my char card. I'm going to say props, and let's just console.log props. Okay. So now, clear this out, run it again. Okay, so notice char card line 4, I've got my data in my char card, right? Well, it's not showing it, but it's, let me try something. Console dot. There we go. So now char card line 4. Well, it's in there. I just have to take my word for it. Okay, so now we're going to do what Tyler said. We're going to take that data and access it inside of our char card, right? So I've got props. Let's do, well, what is props? What am I passing in? Remember, props is just a key value pair, right? It's just an object with a key of char and a value of the char object. So I can pull out the char, right? I can say char like this. Does that make sense? Then I have my char here. Is everybody okay with this? So I'm just destructuring. I'm destructuring in the parameter list the key value pair that I'm passing in as props. Okay, so now it still doesn't come up. But I can look at my characters here. So char is this object. So how would I get to Rick Sanchez? How would I get to display Rick Sanchez on the page? So instead of it saying card title, I wanted to say Rick Sanchez. Right. So like Tyler said, we can do, instead of card title, you'd say char dot name. Okay. And now all my cards have the names of the characters. Right? Because char, again, is this object. I want to pull off the name property and have it display in the card where I want it. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? I hope. I hope. Okay. So I've got some other information in here, but I got an image. I want the image. So I've got a image placeholder. So how can I get that image? I want to replace this the same way I got the name, right? I'm going to put these curly braces here. How would I get the image? Oops.
be char.image.
Go. There you go. Char dot image. Okay, now I got my images. Okay. How would I get status? So I'm going to replace this placeholder text with status. Sorry, I closed my. Did I close it? There we go. Back to the console. Here's my status. Same way I got the name, same way I got the image. I want to pull off the status, right? So inside of the card text, curly braces, char.status. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Let me get one more poll. Just makes me nervous when you guys are quiet. Okay, I lost somebody. Okay. Let me end. Share results. Okay. So what I want to do real quick before I break, and again, if you're lost, if you're like totally lost, please come see me or Christian, and we'll be happy to walk through it again with you. So right now I'm using Fetch, right? I'm using the Fetch API to get data. Go back to home. Here it is. So I want to use Axios instead. Okay, so to use Axios, it's the same basic principle, right? I'm going to essentially, I could just copy this. Copy my use effect. And instead of saying fetch, it's axios.get. Okay. And this is going to be simplified, but let's just see what we get before we go down that road. So I'm going to say .then, and let's just say res for response, and let's just see what we get back. Console log res. Okay. And I'll comment this one out so we don't see too much data. Save it. Go back to my application and I get nothing. Uncaught reference error. Reference error. Sorry. Axios is not defined. What did I forget to do?
You see the code again?
Oh, sorry. That's chart card. No, that's home. That's where I want. So it's breaking at line 15 in home.jsx. Right? It's breaking right here. What do I need to do? If I'm going to use something like Axios, right? Axios isn't a variable I've defined. What do I need to do?
Yeah, you've got to import it.
I got to import it. So I'm going to say import Axios. So it should be auto completing for me.
Did you install Axios yet?
I have not. So I got it. Axios, unlike Fetch, is an external library, right? So if we're going to use it, we have to import it. So I'm going to stop my server. And how do I import? How do I install Axios?
npm I Axios.
You got it. npm I Axios. Okay, that'll go out to the npm repository, grab Axios for me. Installed 97 packages. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's all 9 packages, 97 want money, but sorry, can't help you. So now we should have Axios available. So I'm going to fire my server back up. Oops, not install Axios again. That's fine. There we go. Okay, server's running again. Now I'm still getting the same error, but I can fix it, right? So I'm going to import Axios. And now, since their node mod, since the Axios library exists in the node modules, it knows to import it. Okay. And now what are we getting? So I'm calling axios.get. I'm passing it the endpoint that I want to get data from. And then I'm console logging what I get back. So this is what we see here is res.
So it's skipping the step where you're converting it to JSON. And it's like it's just giving you the JSON.
It does it for you, right? So
Cool.
Axios performs this step for us. So it's right here, right? Here's my results. So how do I get to that results?
Data.results.
There you go. So res is this whole object. I'm going to drill down into data. Now I'm getting just that data object I want. So I'm going to drill down further into the results so I can get my array of results. So data dot results. Okay. So now I'm getting my results. How do I get my characters to show up again?
Instead of console.log, set characters.
Exactly. And it works just like before. So Axios for get request, it's like, it saves us a line. But for put and post, we're going to be happy we have Axios. It's much easier to work with than fetch. Okay, so if you take anything from today, use Axios. Don't use fetch. It was just for the platform covers it. Axios is built on fetch, so I wanted to at least demo it. Okay. Questions, comments? Cool. I'm going to stop there. Perfect timing. It's just now 2 o'clock.